In the pouring rain of a Chicago night, a silent woman and her loyal German shepherd board a crowded bus. Two thugs laugh, mock, and strike the dog. What they don't know, she once trained canine heroes, and the dog at her feet has already saved her life once. When the knife flashes, the quiet passenger rises, not in rage, but in quiet resolve. One decision changes everything. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe. The rain fell steady on Chicago that afternoon, a cold gray curtain against the bus windows, blurring the city into soft, distant lights. Inside, the air was thick with wet coats and quiet breaths, the kind of hush that settles when people are too tired to speak. Rachel Donovan sat by the window, 35 years old, her face turned toward the streaking rain as though it might wash away the years. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame a face marked by quiet endurance. She wore a dark gray parka, hood up against the damp, over a faded wool sweater, and worn black jeans tucked into high brown work boots, clothes that had seen real miles, not just streets. Her hands rested on her knees, one thumb tracing the old wrist strap she never took off, a small leather band her husband had worn. Tom had been gone 4 years now, taken in a patrol accident that still felt like yesterday. The pain had settled deep, a constant ache she carried without complaint. She spoke little these days, lived alone on the edge of the city, her world narrowed to the house, the yard, and the dog at her feet. Social conversations felt like effort she no longer had. Yet in that narrowing, she had found a kind of peace, simple, solitary, and enough. At her side lay Blaze, the German shepherd, 6 years old, black and tan coat, still thick despite the years. His head rested on his paws, amber eyes half closed but never fully asleep. A faint scar ran along his hind leg, a reminder of the day he had pulled Rachel from under falling debris in the warehouse raid that ended her career and nearly her life. He had been Tom's dog first, trained together in the canine unit, then became hers after. Blaze asked for nothing, only to be near. His presence was steady, warm, the one thing that still felt like home. When the bus swayed, he shifted closer, a soft press of shoulder against her leg, as if to say he remembered too. The trouble started quietly. 2 young men, hoods low, voices low and sharp, moved through the aisle. One shoved a young nurse who had been standing near the door, her light blue scrubs peeking from under a beige coat, her face pale with sudden fear. The other leaned over Rachel, knife glinting under the flickering overhead light, words mean and mocking. They laughed at her silence, at the dog they called useless. Then the shorter one lifted his boot and kicked Blaze square in the ribs. The bus seemed to hold its breath. Blaze rose without sound, ears forward, body low, every muscle coiled. He did not lunge. He waited. His eyes locked on Rachel, waiting for the word that would release him. Rachel felt the shift in the air, the metallic taste of danger, the old training waking in her bones. She lifted her head slowly. Her gaze met theirs, calm, measured, the same look she had given suspects in dark warehouses years ago. Beneath it lay the old sorrow, the grief that had taught her patience, but also the quiet fire that had never quite gone out. In that moment, the rain outside seemed louder, drumming on the roof like a heartbeat. Rachel did not speak yet. She simply placed her hand on Blaze's collar, fingers steady. The dog relaxed fractionally, trusting her completely. She felt the warmth of his fur, the slow rise and fall of his breathing, and something inside her steadied too. The past was still there, Tom's laugh, the knock at the door, the empty chair. But so was this, a dog who had never left, a city that kept moving, and a woman who, despite everything, still knew how to stand. She would not let the darkness take more. Not today. The bus lights flickered once, twice, like tired eyes in the rain-soaked dusk. The smell of wet wool and diesel hung heavy, and the only sound was the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement. Rachel felt it before she saw it, the low rumble in Blaze's throat, barely audible, more vibration than sound. His ears lifted, sharp and straight, amber eyes narrowing toward the aisle. He had always known danger a heartbeat before she did. She remembered the night in the warehouse, the same low growl just before the beam cracked and fell. Tom had laughed then, called it the dog's sixth sense. Now the memory stung, but it also steadied her. Rachel rose slowly, knees creaking from old injuries, body moving with the deliberate calm of someone who had learned patience the hard way. She stepped into the aisle, placing herself between the two hooded men and the frightened passengers. Her voice came out low, even, final. "Step back." One hand rested on Blaze's collar, fingers light, trusting. The dog held still, muscles taut under black and tan fur, every instinct screaming to protect, yet waiting for her word. In that small space between them, Rachel felt the years peel away. The training yard at dawn, Tom's hand on her shoulder, Blaze as a young pup bounding between them. Grief had taken so much, but not this, not the quiet understanding between woman and dog. She breathed in the damp air, exhaled slowly, and felt something shift inside her, a small, stubborn refusal to let fear win again. The taller man laughed, a sharp, ugly sound that cut through the hush. He stepped closer, knife catching the dim light, words dripping with mockery. Rachel did not flinch. She saw the tremor in his hand, the overconfidence of youth who had never faced real consequence. The shorter one edged sideways, eyes darting toward the door. Blaze shifted then, only a fraction, positioning his body to block the path, teeth bared in a silent warning, low growl rolling deep in his chest. Rachel's heart beat steady. She remembered the day Blaze had pulled her from the rubble, blood on his muzzle, refusing to leave her side even when the medics tried to move him. That same loyalty lived in him now, fierce and quiet. When the taller man lunged, knife flashing, Rachel moved without thought, old reflexes waking like muscle memory. She caught the wrist, twisted, redirected the force in one smooth motion. The blade clattered to the floor. The man stumbled, off balance. Blaze did not attack. He simply stepped forward, shoulder to shoulder with her, a living wall of fur and resolve, forcing the second man to freeze mid-step. The passengers gasped, then fell silent. Rachel held the first man's arm behind him, firm but not cruel, her breath coming even. She looked into his eyes, not with anger, but with something sadder. The knowledge that choices have weight, and some weights you carry for a long time. In the stillness that followed, Rachel felt the bus sway gently, rain tapping like fingers on glass. Blaze pressed closer, his warmth against her leg, breath steady and warm. She loosened her grip slightly, not out of weakness, but because she had seen enough pain in her life to know that more of it rarely helped. The man sagged, fight gone out of him. Rachel released him slowly, stepping back. Blaze stayed where he was, eyes never leaving the two men, a quiet guardian. She felt the old ache in her chest, the loss of Tom, the empty house, the nights she had sat alone, wondering if anything mattered anymore. But here, in this crowded, dripping bus, something small and good had happened. She had not struck out in rage. She had simply stood. And Blaze had stood with her. That was enough for now. The bus slowed, brakes sighing. Rachel knelt, hand on Blaze's head, fingers sinking into thick fur. He leaned into her touch, eyes soft for the first time since the trouble began. In that moment, she understood something she had forgotten. You do not have to be whole to protect what is precious. You only have to be present. The bus came to a shuddering stop at the curb, red and blue lights pulsing through the rain-streaked windows like slow heartbeats. The doors hissed open, letting in a rush of cold, wet air that carried the faint scent of asphalt and distant sirens. Rachel stood in the aisle, hand still resting on Blaze's head. The two men were on the floor now, wrists cuffed behind them, faces pale under the harsh overhead lights. Officers moved in, two young ones first, then an older sergeant with salt and pepper hair and the tired eyes of a man who had seen too many nights like this. He glanced at Rachel, then at the dog, and something in his posture changed, respect, quiet and unspoken. The passengers stirred, murmurs rising like steam. The young nurse stepped forward, her beige coat damp and clinging, hands still trembling but voice steady. She looked at Rachel with wide, grateful eyes. "You're the one from the warehouse, aren't you? The handler whose dog pulled her out." The words hung in the air, soft but clear. Rachel felt them land like stones in still water, ripples spreading through years she had tried to keep quiet. She nodded once, small, not meeting the nurse's gaze. The woman reached out, touched Rachel's arm lightly. "Thank you. For all of us." Rachel swallowed. The ache in her chest deepened, not from pain, but from the sudden weight of being seen again. She had spent 4 years invisible, safe in the shadows of grief. Now the light had found her, gentle but insistent. Blaze sat close, his breathing slow and even, ears flicking toward every new sound. The sergeant knelt, studied the dog with a practiced eye. "K9?" he asked quietly. Rachel nodded again. The man's voice softened. "He's a good one." Rachel looked down at Blaze, his black and tan coat still damp from the rain that had seeped in, the faint scar on his hind leg catching the light. She remembered the warehouse, smoke thick as fog, the crack of timber, Blaze's teeth on her sleeve, pulling her free while she bled. Tom had been gone by then, but Blaze had stayed, always stayed. The sergeant spoke into his radio, words clipped but calm. Minutes later, another officer approached, folder in hand. "Those two, they're part of the Carver crew. Been hitting buses and corner stores for months. Knives, threats, revenge if anyone talks." He looked at Rachel. "You just stepped into something bigger." The words settled heavy. Rachel felt the old fear rise, not for herself, but for the quiet life she had scraped together, the house on the edge of town, the evenings when the only sound was Blaze's tail thumping against the floor. Yet beneath the fear was something else, a small, stubborn resolve. She had not asked for this, but she would not run. The nurse lingered as the others filed out. She knelt beside Blaze, hand hovering until he leaned in, accepting the touch. "He saved you once," she whispered, "and today he helped save us." Rachel felt tears prick behind her eyes, not from sorrow, but from the sudden clarity that some things never leave you. Loyalty, memory, the quiet promise between a woman and her dog. She looked at Blaze, his amber eyes steady, and felt the years soften around the edges. Grief had carved deep channels in her, but it had not emptied her. There was still room for gratitude, for connection, for the small miracles that arrive unasked. She stepped off the bus into the rain, Blaze at her heel. The lights of the squad cars washed over them, red and blue fading into the gray. Rachel breathed in the wet night air, felt the collar under her fingers, and knew one truth above all. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The house sat quiet on the edge of the city that night, rain tapping steady on the tin roof like fingers remembering an old song. Inside, the single lamp cast a warm circle on the worn wooden floor, shadows stretching long across the walls. Rachel sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, the screen's glow pale against her face. The call had come just after midnight, voice low, familiar from years ago, one of the old sergeants. "They know your name, Rachel. The Carver crew. They don't forgive." She set the phone down slowly, fingers tracing the scar on her palm from the warehouse day. Fear moved through her like cold water, but it did not drown her. She had lived with worse. She rose, walked to the window, peered through the rain-streaked glass. The street was empty, streetlights blurred. Blaze followed, silent, his black and tan coat catching the lamp's light. She knelt, cupped his head in both hands, felt the steady warmth of him. "We've done this before, haven't we?" she whispered. He leaned in, amber eyes calm, as if to say yes. She spent the next hours moving with quiet purpose, checking locks, laying out the old service flashlight, placing the phone where she could reach it. Blaze walked the house with her, nose low, ears forward, every circuit of the rooms a silent patrol. When he paused at the back door, ears pricked, a soft growl rumbling deep, Rachel's heart quickened. She trusted him more than any alarm. The bond between them had been forged in smoke and blood. It had never broken. The night deepened. Rain drummed harder, masking sounds. Then the knock, soft, deliberate. Rachel froze. Blaze was already moving, body low, a low rumble building in his chest. She opened the door a crack, flashlight ready. 3 shadows stood on the porch, hoods up, faces hidden. One stepped forward, knife glinting. Before Rachel could speak, Blaze surged, door pushed wide by his shoulder, teeth bared, launching at the first man. The attacker swung, the blade caught Blaze's hind leg. A shallow cut, blood blooming dark on fur. Blaze did not falter. He drove the man back, pinning him against the porch rail, snarling low and fierce. The second man lunged toward Rachel. She met him with the flashlight, crack against wrist, knife clattering away, then twisted his arm, forcing him down. The third hesitated, eyes wide at the sight of the dog still holding ground despite the wound. Blaze's breath came in sharp pants, but he did not yield. He shifted, blocking the doorway, a living barrier between Rachel and the night. She called the police, voice steady, hand shaking only after she hung up. Sirens rose in the distance. The men cursed, struggled, but the fight had gone out of them. Rachel dropped to her knees beside Blaze. Blood matted his fur. He licked her hand once, weak but sure. She pressed her forehead to his, tears falling freely now, mixing with rain that dripped from the eaves. Memories flooded in, the warehouse collapsing, Blaze's teeth on her sleeve pulling her free, Tom's voice fading on the phone that last night. She had lost so much. Yet here was this dog, wounded, unwavering, still giving everything. "You're the hero," she whispered, voice breaking, "always have been." The words carried years of grief, guilt, gratitude. She held him close, felt his heartbeat against hers, steady despite the pain. In that moment, something cracked open inside her. Not a wound reopening, but a door long closed. Forgiveness, perhaps. For herself. For the life that had taken so much. For the nights she had blamed herself for surviving. Blaze leaned heavier into her, eyes soft, trusting. The sirens grew louder. Rachel did not move. She stayed there, in the rain and the light, holding the one thing that had never left her. And in the quiet between heartbeats, she made a silent promise. Whatever came next, she would not let the darkness take him from her. Not ever. The rain had finally stopped in Chicago. A pale winter sun slipped through bare branches, touching the wet sidewalks with silver. Inside the small house on the south side, the wooden floor creaked under slow steps. The air smelled of coffee, damp wool, and the faint cedar scent of old dog fur. Rachel Donovan stood by the kitchen window, 35 years old now, her dark hair pulled back loosely, strands of early gray at the temples. Her eyes, once sharp with command, carried a softer weariness, the kind that comes after too many nights listening for footsteps that never came again. She wore a plain gray sweater, sleeves pushed up, revealing the thin scar along her forearm. A reminder of the day the world broke open. Beside her, on the worn rug, lay Blaze. The German shepherd, 8 years strong, black and tan coat still thick, ears alert even in rest. His brown eyes followed her every breath, steady, patient, the way only a creature who has carried your grief can do. The city had moved on. With the bus video and the night of broken glass at her door, the detectives closed the file on the whole crew. No more shadows in the alley, no more late-night calls from the old precinct. Rachel felt the silence like a gift she did not deserve. She had expected anger, maybe fear. Instead came the quiet. And in that quiet she began to hear again the soft thud of Blaze's tail against the floor, the distant horn of a tugboat on the lake, the way her own heartbeat no longer raced at every creak. She remembered the hospital bed after the ambush, the smell of antiseptic, the doctor's voice saying the leg wound was clean, just stitches. Blaze had limped in on 3 legs, bandaged paw lifted like an offering, and laid his head in her lap. She had cried then, not loud, not dramatic, just the slow leak of years held back. "You should have stayed down," she whispered. He answered with a single soft huff, as if to say he never would. Now the days were smaller. Morning walks along the lakefront path, the wind cold on her cheeks. Children pointing, whispering, "That's the hero dog." Older folks nodding with respect, the kind they reserve for survivors who do not boast. Rachel felt the weight of their gazes, gentle but heavy. She was no hero. She had frozen once, long ago, when her husband needed her most. She had let the job take him. Blaze had been there that day too, pulled her from the wreckage, licked the blood from her face while sirens wailed. He had never blamed her. She had blamed herself enough for both of them. One afternoon in early spring, she drove to the old training yard. The grass was still brown, but the chain-link fence stood firm. A retired sergeant, Tom Harlan, 68, white hair cropped short, voice gravel from too many cigarettes, waited by the gate. His hands shook a little when he shook hers, but his eyes were kind, the eyes of a man who had buried friends and still rose each morning. "You're back?" he said simply. She looked at the empty kennels, then at Blaze sitting straight beside her. "I want to help," she told him. "Not for me, for the ones who are alone now." Tom nodded, no questions. He understood. The first class began the next week. Veterans mostly, some widows, a few young people with eyes too old for their years. Rachel spoke little. She let Blaze do the talking. He moved among them slowly, let them touch his ears, rested his head in laps when tears came. One man, a former Marine with a missing hand, sat on the ground and cried without shame, while Blaze simply stayed, breathing with him. Rachel watched from the fence, arms crossed, throat tight. She saw herself in every face, the loneliness that settles like dust, the fear that tomorrow will be the same, and she saw forgiveness too, not loud, not preached, just present, in the way Blaze chose to stay, in the way she was finally choosing to stay too. The sun dipped lower, painting the yard gold. Rachel knelt, ran her fingers through Blaze's ruff. His fur was warm against the evening chill. He turned his head, met her eyes, deep, knowing, without judgment. "You're the hero," she murmured, voice breaking just a little. "You always were. You taught me loyalty can mend what's broken." He leaned into her hand, a quiet promise. The city kept moving beyond the fence. Sirens in the distance, laughter from a passing bus, life going on. And for the first time in years, Rachel felt she belonged to it again. As the years gather, loneliness can creep in like evening shadows, illness weighs heavier, and the house grows too quiet. But remember, true strength often walks beside us in silence, loyal and unwavering, just like a faithful dog. You are never truly alone. Your love, your memories, your quiet courage still matter. Hold on, dear friend. Share this story if it touched your heart. Leave a comment and subscribe for more. May the Lord bless and keep you, heal your body, and fill your days with gentle peace. You are loved.